Hello and welcome back to the Pilot Roundtable, a Southgate Media Group podcast. I'm Kyle Tremblay, the editor of TVBinges.com, and I am joined as always by TV Binges writer Olivia Richards. Olivia, hello.
Hey, what's up?
Oh, nothing much. I'm just getting back from space.
Oh, God.
Have a good time. That is because we're talking about ABC's new 1960s set space, but not in space drama, Astronaut Wives Club. Olivia, how did you like the pilot?
Oh, my God. Okay, maybe my expectations were, like, a little bit too high, but oh, my God, this show.
Okay.
I can't.
You just can't. Oh, this is going to be a problem, because I can't either, because I got really bored watching the pilot.
Well, I know this show is, right up your alley, so.
Oh, yeah, I mean, you tell me. Well, actually, it's funny you say that, because, I mean, Mad Men is my favorite show of all time. And so, there were some Mad Men comparisons going into this, albeit really superficial ones, really about both shows being set in the 60s, and that's it. Like, that's as far as it went.
The one comparison we can draw.
Yeah, I mean, that was it. But at the same time, like, you figure, okay, anytime you're seeing the 1960s, it's interesting. It's an interesting time of history, yada, yada, yada. This version of the 60s, not that interesting, I dare say. The version presented in Astronaut Wives Club, at least in the pilot, appears to be the version of the 1960s out of a travel magazine written in 1960 about how great the 1960s were. Like, it's like a glossy, gauzed over, peppy, floral dress wearing 1960s that I did not find interesting in the slightest.
Which I found interesting because, I guess 2 weeks ago we had done Aquarius, which was the dark, noir, sort of 1940s, like, filter version of the 1960s about, like, the socio-political climate. And then, we jumped to this version, which is, like, the flower power, like, Desperate Housewives version of the 1960s.
Yeah. Well, you brought up Desperate Housewives, and
I
wanted to get your thoughts on that show. I don't know, did you watch it? What did you feel about it? Like, what are your thoughts on Desperate Housewives?
I think I saw one episode because my friend made me watch it with her.
Oh.
But, I mean, like, you think about that sort of character study where, it is kind of like a comedy in its own right. And you kind of see just the cattiness of the show and, kind of just how they derive comedy from just, the backstabbing and this sort of, like, ridiculous drama that goes on. And it kind of doesn't take itself so seriously. Yeah. This show wasn't that. This show definitely wasn't, kind of something that didn't take itself completely seriously and that you could kind of laugh at. Like, and that's, I think, where part of the problem came in.
I think you hit the nail on the head. I think this show, I think it shoots itself in the foot more than one way, but in the way you're discussing, I think the crucial way is that this should have been Desperate Housewives. It's unrealistic to expect it to be Mad Men. That's out of the question right off the bat. No show is ever going to be Mad Men because Mad Men is singular. There's no reason this couldn't have been Desperate Housewives. Desperate Housewives is, regardless of your feelings about it, it's not such an ambitious standard as to not be attainable. That's a show that can be remade with different characters in a different setting. I think the problem here is because NASA functions a lot in both culture and just practically as a kind of military organization. It's almost like you're doing a show about Army wives or Marine wives or whatever. That the show has too much respect for the women to really treat them the way that Desperate Housewives did. Desperate Housewives would sell out any character in a second. If they want to tell a story, they will absolutely make a character awful or make them do an unspeakably bad thing or have them be sly and underhanded. And I think this show is trying to drive that kind of drama, but without ever allowing the characters to be so unlikable that you actually feel something for it. And I think that's the mistake at the center of this show, is that it's too kids' gloves with its main cast.
Also, I think it's like in Desperate Housewives, it's like you had to have a really good idea of who these women were to kind of understand like the drama and the cattiness and kind of be able to laugh at them. This show, it's like the characters were such archetypes and they were such like like they didn't really, I can't remember any of them individually. When you lump them all together, I can kind of vaguely picture their faces, and partly because like they gave us these introductions in such a rapid order.
Oh my gosh.
Never really got to know. It was like, oh, and this is, Louise, and this is, like whatever, and this is, that woman in the pink dress. Like I knew what they were wearing. I don't remember their names or what their personalities were, but that was like, oh, this is the smart one, and this is the other wife, and this is, the funny one, and this is, the hot one. It just it was such a blur.
I just like that. First of all, I don't know how you didn't pick up who the characters were, because every single line of their dialogue is explaining exactly who they are. Like it was the most dry expository dialogue I've ever seen. But you're right in that. I feel like what I learned about all these characters in this entire pilot is what is contained in the 3-sentence summary on the website in like the character bio section. Like I feel like every line of dialogue was expository, but not for any deeper purpose. It was just like explaining the bare minimum character sheet facts about all these characters. And I'm with you. I didn't retain any of it. It just, I mean, we're talking about a show where the shy character, to drive home the point that she's shy, just starts stuttering uncontrollably. Like that's where we're at with this. Like they weren't confident that we would understand that she's shy, so they give her a crippling stutter. Like that's the kind.
Is that not how shyness works?
I mean, listen, you're either a go-getter wearing a floral dress, or you're just stuttering to the point where you're not functional. That's what we're talking about here. There's no in between.
Oh, yeah, the show is just a summer gem.
Yeah. Yeah.
Again, it was really disappointing because, like, when I saw previews for it, it did not play off, or it didn't come off like it actually played out in the pilot. Like, I thought it was going to be sort of a little bit more of, like, an in-depth sort of, like, character study, or something more along the lines of Mad Men, like not exactly like that, but like sort of more of giving us an understanding of the socio-political climate and like kind of understanding who these women are and like what their bigger role is. And then I sat down and watched it, and again within the first 5 minutes I was like, oh god, like here we go.
Yeah, I think you could have gone two ways with this, and this show went neither. you could do that. You could do. I think a more attainable comparison would be Masters of Sex.
Yeah.
Would a kind of a period drama that definitely downplays the period it's in. I mean, it's just part of the setting, but it's not like the whole. It doesn't determine the entire aesthetic of the show. Even though it's set in the past, Masters of Sex very much looks like a modern TV show. To me, this looked like a show from 1970, just in HD. Like that's what the show looked like to me. But you can either go that direction, where it's what you're talking about, a character study about a group of women who history has kind of forgotten, but who have a very interesting story to tell. Or you could do the Desperate Housewives thing, about a scandalous group of women who all secretly hate each other and are working against each other, but have to pretend to be friends, and each week is a different mischief-making mission, like that kind of very fun, breezy show. And instead, like okay, I think one of the safest assumptions you could have made going into this show is that it would pass the Bechdel test, because it's a show about a group of women and only that.
Yeah, right?
But yet, somehow, this pilot is kind of all about the men. Like, it's about the astronauts. And I thought there was enough astronaut material. And that material was so much more interesting. Like to me, the best scene of this pilot is when the first astronaut, whose name I forget, I should probably know from history class, the Alan Shepard. Thank God. When Alan
that just went over my head.
Oh, good. I'm not the only one. When Alan Shepard makes it into space, that mission control scene with like the slow motion montage and the sort of very stereotypical but still pleasing like sequence where it's like mission control, come in, mission control, and there's like 5 seconds of silence, and then he finally like breaks through the radio and everyone cheers. Like that was the best scene of this pilot, and that scene didn't involve any of the women. And that's a problem when your show is about the women.
Oh my God. And that was the thing. I was so excited when I was writing my weekly 5, just because I was like, okay, so like, we're kind of going to get to see like the untold stories, sort of like, going behind the scenes of like the stories that we all already know. Like we all know about the moon landing. We all know about like, everything that went behind that historically, but it's like we don't really get to hear what we really should have seen on this show if we were going like the more dramatic, serious route, as opposed to like, the Desperate Housewives, sort of Real Housewives of the moon landing route.
Real Housewives of the Moon Landing, 1,000 times better title for this show.
Yes.
I don't understand at all the decision to make the men a part of this story that's not just like the setting. Like I don't know why they're characters. I don't know why we're following them when they're not in their wives' presence. I don't know why they seem to have the best moments of this pilot. Like if you're going to do a show called Astronaut Wives Club and cast all these really mostly good actresses and well-known actresses in this show, I don't need the astronaut side of things. Like if we're gonna tell this sort of other side of history story, then tell the story. Don't hedge with mission control moments unless one of the women is in mission control. Like just like cutting away to her sitting silently watching TV doesn't give me anything. It's like, oh, she was scared? I could have assumed that. That's great. That's not, there's no revelation there. And I feel like the show doesn't have any confidence in that its story is interesting, and yet it also feels the need to hedge that story because it's scared to have any real fun with its subjects. It won't have any real fun with the women, and so it's sort of left in this limbo where it's neither interesting or committed to being uninteresting, and we're just left with this kind of nothing show about a bunch of uninteresting people who exist for the purpose of serving their husband. That's where we wound up.
And it sucks. I'm like, it could have been really interesting. And I'm wondering, just like, I know it's one of ABC's summer dramas that's premiering. And I'm wondering if it would have been different if this had been a fall premiere, if maybe this could have been a different show, or if it was just, sort of a weird set of circumstances that created this. But yeah, I'm definitely disappointed.
Well, this show has been talked about forever. It was supposed to premiere last fall, and it got bumped all the way back, 9 months to the summer. And I feel like, I mean, this is pure speculation, but I feel like that might have been to add the astronaut stuff. Like, it's just hard for me to imagine that they would conceptualize a show like this and have the astronauts themselves play such a large role. And I feel like they saw this pilot and were like, "Holy cow, this is boring. We better add this mission control scene to give it like an actual high note." Which it does, but then it also undercuts everything about the rest of the episode because it's the most interesting part. And that's the idea that the men are the most interesting aspect of this story is exactly the idea that Astronaut Wives Club needs to be fighting, and yet this pilot only underscores it. That's when you know you've missed. When you inadvertently prove the opposing case with your pilot. And
I know, and it's so hard because I'm like, how can you bounce back from that? Because I'm like, even if it does get better in like the next 2 to 3 episodes, or I know it's like a 10 episode, whatever event, but yeah, like if it's already sort of a rough pilot, then what is sort of the reason to keep watching after a pilot like this?
Yeah, I don't know who would watch this. I guess that's my question. I mean, we've already done the comparison. We talked Desperate Housewives, and I mean, obviously we could bring up Pan Am and what was the other show? Playboy Club, as sort of failed 1960s network pilots. But those were both explicitly trying to be Mad Men. I feel like this show isn't even trying to be Mad Men. It's not trying to be Desperate Housewives. I don't think it's trying to be anything. Can you, if someone is listening and hasn't watched the pilot, is there any reason to watch?
I guess if you're into like the 1960s era and you're just sort of looking at it from like an aesthetic point of view, it did a really good job capturing the era just sort of like visually. But when you actually look at the content of the show, yeah, it really doesn't get past just looking at the costumes and the scenery and, sort of like the other pieces that they kind of threw in there from the 1960s. Not even the music. The music was really off too.
That was the one thing people really liked about Aquarius. Is they licensed all that great '60s music, which in our podcast about that show I said was not so great. And it heard the wrath of the internet. But yeah, you don't even get that here. There's no '60s music. It's really pretty threadbare in terms of like reasons to stick with this pilot, and that's unfortunate because I agree with you. There's an idea here that if executed differently probably could have worked, but as it stands, this is just forgettable and pretty bad. Olivia, thumbs up or thumbs down on Astronaut Wives Club?
I'm gonna have to give it a big, actually 2 big astronomical thumbs down.
Wow, harsh. I think we've been on a streak where I've given everything a thumbs down because that's what I do, and you've been giving thumbs ups. So now that really goes to show just how disappointing this pilot was. That you're giving it the solid thumbs down.
I know, I couldn't keep my optimism up.
Yeah, well, I'm gonna have to go thumbs up. No, I'm just kidding. Thumbs down, obviously. No real reason to watch. You can skip this one. You've been listening to the Pilot Roundtable, a TVBinges.com and Southgate Media Group production. You can listen to all of our episodes on iTunes, where you can rate and review us. We would appreciate that. Or find us at southgatemediagroup.com. Follow Olivia on Twitter at RichardsOlivia, and me on Twitter at KyleLovesTV. Until next time.